Leviticus begins with God telling Moses how the sacrificial system will work, beginning with the burnt offering or the whole burnt offering. So the question is, what is the whole burnt offering? And I would like to dive more into that in this case as we go through this video. See, in ancient Israel, the smoke rising from the altar was more than just the burning of an animal. It was a direct line to the divine. Known as the ḥôlâ, or the ascending offering, the burnt offering was a sacrifice in which the entire animal was consumed by the flames except for the hide. This complete dedication served as a gift to God. Intended to invoke the presence of God and obtain blessings, it could also be used as a means of prayer for forgiveness. The ḥôlâ has roots stretching back to the earliest traditions. The burnt offering held a central place in the Israelite worship, embodying a profound act of reverence and a desire for connection with God. The burnt offering was a central sacrifice in ancient Israelite worship, meaning that which ascends. The name reflects the unique characteristics of the ḥôlâ. The entire animal was consumed by the fire on the altar, with the smoke rising towards the heavens. I chose the word consumed by the fire because the ancient world saw the ḥôlâ as the food of the gods. For the Israelites, however, God does not want them to necessarily see this as his food, as in they have to feed him. He's not looking for that, but to eventually be associated with prayer. It is not through bringing food to God that we get God's attention. Instead, God has given us prayer. The entire animal, except for the hide, is consumed by the fire. The hide was given to the officiating priest. Passing through the fire was how the animal rose to the heavens. It transformed the sacrifice. All the portions of the sacrifices that were for God passed through the fire. The portions of the sacrifice that were to be consumed by the people were boiled. This act of complete incineration also symbolized total devotion and commitment to God, distinguishing it from other sacrifices where the portions reserved for the priests and offerers did not pass through the fire. The ritual procedure for burnt offering was detailed and specific. The person offering the sacrifice would bring the unblemished male animal from either the herd or the flock to the entrance of the tent of meeting. They would then lay their hand on the animal's head, signifying ownership or identification with the sacrifice. Following this, the animal was slaughtered, and then priests would meticulously dash its blood against all sides of the altar, ensuring a thorough application. The animal was then skinned and quartered, and the priest would arrange the wood on the altar and then light it on fire, carefully laying out the animal parts before supervising the complete burning of the offering. Did you notice how the animal was killed? It was only then that the animal was put on the altar. The animal was never killed on the altar. Instead, the animal was always killed someplace else, and then came the ritual of placing the animal on the altar. The burnt offering held a prominent place in the sacrificial system in ancient Israel. It is attested in earlier sources. This twice daily sacrifice that was always ascending before the Lord caused the phrase burnt offerings and peace offerings to become shorthand for the entire sacrificial system. The daily sacrifices consisted of a lamb, cereal, and drink offering, and took place in the morning and evening. It served various purposes. In the ancient mind, the sacrifice attracted the deity's attention, invoking divine presence for ritual occasions, seeking divine response, and testing prophetic authority. Remember Elijah and the prophets of Baal? No greater cultic calamity could be imagined than the loss of this sacrifice, since it symbolized the severing of the divine-human relationship. Look at Daniel 8, verse 11. Thus, when Paul says that we are to pray without ceasing, it implies that the divine-human relationship has transformed just as Jesus said it would, for now worshipers worship in spirit and truth. As stated before, the lack of the burnt offering could also symbolize the severing of the divine-human relationship. In fact, in 70 AD, when the temple was destroyed, according to Josephus, the daily temple sacrifice ceased due to lack of priests or lambs. And then the destruction happened. Both the lack of priests and the lack of lambs and the destruction of the temple should cause the people of Israel to examine what that means. The function and purpose of the burnt offering was multifaceted. It was primarily a gift to God, a means of eliciting divine presence and blessing. The purpose of the divine offering was entreaty, covering a range of motives such as paying homage, thanksgiving, and requests for forgiveness and for purification or purgation. The pleasing aroma of the burnt sacrifice was a way for the Israelites to smell for themselves the delight that God had in their coming to him with their request. Theologically, the complete burning of the sacrifice symbolized total devotion and commitment to God. The continual offering, the timid sacrifice, symbolized God's constant presence among the people. Over time, as the sacrificial system developed, the purification and reparation offerings became the primary means of seeking atonement. These are different than the whole burnt offering, with the burnt offering taking on more of a gift-giving and devotional role. Despite this shift, the burnt offering remained a central part of the Israelite worship because it happened twice a day, embodying their desire to connect with God. So I would like to take a look at Leviticus chapter 1 so that we can now see what I just said. As we read Leviticus chapter 1, you should begin to see the things that I have said. So shifting over to reading, this is Leviticus chapter 1, the burnt offering. The Lord called Moses and spoke to him from the tent of meetings. He said, "Speak the Israelites and say to them, when anyone among you brings an offering to the Lord, bring as your offering an animal from either the herd or the flock. If the offering is a burnt offering from the herd, you are to offer the male without defect. You must present it at the entrance to the tent of meeting so that it will be accepted to the Lord. You are to lay your hands on the head of the burnt offering, and it will be accepted on your behalf to make atonement for you. You are to slaughter the young bull before the Lord, and then Aaron's sons and priests shall bring the blood and splash it against the sides of the altar at the entrance of the tent of meeting. You are to skin the burnt offering and cut it into pieces. The sons of Aaron and the priests are to put the fire on the altar and arrange wood on the altar. Then Aaron's sons and the priest shall arrange the pieces, including the head and the fat on the wood that is burning on the altar. You are to wash the internal organs and the legs with water, and the priest shall burn it on the altar. It is a burnt offering, a food offering, an aroma pleasing the Lord. If the offering is a burnt offering from the flock, from either the sheep or the goats, you are to offer a male without defect. You are to slaughter it at the north side of the altar. Notice that it is not on the altar, but it's at the north side of the altar before the Lord. And Aaron's sons and the priest shall splash its blood against the side of the altar. You are to cut it into pieces, and the priest shall arrange them, including the head and the fat on the wood that is burning on the altar. You are to wash the internal organs and the legs with water, and the priest is to bring all of them and burn them on the altar. It is a burnt offering, a food sacrifice, an aroma pleasing to the Lord. And then here it says, if the offering of the Lord is a burnt offering of birds, you are to offer a dove or a young pigeon. And then it'll keep going. And then this time it'll talk about a grain offering or a cereal offering, because you don't have herds or goats or access to doves or pigeons. All you have, because you are the poorest of the poor, is the ability to bring grain. And so there is never a reason why you cannot come before the Lord and request his presence and pray that you might be forgiven, that you might have blessing, that you might be able to be before the Lord. These are the ways in which you would come, because the offering is always burning before the Lord, and it's something that is never supposed to stop. In fact, if we take a look here at the burnt offering, at its most basic level, the ḥôlâ was considered a gift to the deity, which the deity consumes as a soothing odor. The burnt offering constituted the daily food of the deity. These sacrifices took place in the morning and the evening and were offered along with cereal and a drink offering. And then this continues and talks about a peace offering. If we take a look here, that the burnt offering was to be perpetual, that there is always supposed to be a perpetual burnt offering. You're not always going to bring your own burnt offering before the Lord, but there is that the burnt offering is to always be before the Lord. The main concern of this paragraph, Leviticus 6:2, was that the fire of the altar of the burnt offering should never go out. The point is made 5 times. It was the priest's duty to keep this fire lit with the carcass of the burnt offering smoldering away on top of it. The law focuses on the most difficult part of the task, keeping the fire going all night. It was customary to offer a burnt offering every morning and every evening. On most days, other offerings would be offered during the day, but after the evening burnt offering, there would be nothing until the next day, and without careful tending, the fire would go out. The priest must not allow this to happen. The fire must be kept burning. It must not go out. If we continue and we take a look at another place where it talks about the burnt offering could be from cattle, that's from the herd, sheep and goats, that's from the flock, or birds. And so that would usually be limited to the poor. And then if you were extremely poor, then it would be the cereal offering. Amid the diversity of the different kinds of animal offerings and many distinctive ways they were offered to the Lord, it appears that there was one constant in the presentation of the sacrificial animals, the laying on of the hand, or plural hands if more than one person was involved. It's always a person lays on a hand, and if there's more than you, then each person that is presenting the offering will lay on their hand, not plural hands, a single hand. The purpose of this act was to identify the offerer with his or her offering, and possibly also to designate or consecrate the offerer for the purpose of the offering. He is to lay his hand on the head of the burnt offering and will be accepted on his behalf to make atonement for him. The laying on the hand did not transfer anything to the animal, least of all sin. Only holy things could have contact with the altar. In the scapegoat ritual, the high priest was to lay both hands on the animal and confess the sins of the whole congregation in order to expressly transfer the sins of the goat. But in that case, the animal was not offered on the altar, but instead was sent far away from the altar as possible. And so then in this case, we realize that no sinful animal was offered on the altar. In fact, we were told that it was an offering without defect. And so then what does it mean to make atonement? That's the Hebrew word for kippur. Atone, or to expiate, is the customary translation for kippur. But in most cases, this is incorrect. In biblical poetry, its parallel synonym is usually maha, or wipe. And so in Hebrew, they will take, especially in poetry, they'll take the same idea and then they'll say it again, but with different words, so that you can then hold on to it in your head as to what is going on. Because remember, a lot of these things are spoken to a person. So you will say one thing and then you'll repeat it differently with synonymous words so that the person can have time to be able to process what was said. And so in biblical poetry, kippur's parallel synonym is usually maha, wipe, or heser, remove, suggesting that kippur means purge. Ritual texts support this meaning, for they regularly couple kippur with purify and decontaminate. Other poetic passages will use a parallel kissa, or cover, giving the contrary notion that kippur connotates smearing on a new substance instead of effacing an existing one. Philologists have been divided on its etymology because evidence from surrounding regions can be cited in support of either connotation, mainly from Arabic or Akkadian, cover or wipe. Yet both meanings may go back to the common notion, rub, because a substance may either be rubbed on or rubbed off. The derived meaning wipe and cover may be complementary and not contradictory. This is true especially in Akkadian, where both usages are attested in medical and magical texts, where the step between ashwin and ashmir is so short we cannot distinguish between the cleaning and entreatment. And so kippur, the better translation is purify or purge, and not to atone or expiate. It brings the wrong understanding of the meaning. As we read Leviticus, in the first couple of chapters, the point of view is from the donor for the burnt offering, the cereal offering, and the well-being offering. And then we hit chapter 4 and 5, and the sacrifices required for expiation, or more likely a better translation is purification and reparation. And then if we were to continue to keep reading, then we would find out that chapters 6 and 7 deal with the same sacrifices, but this time from the point of view of the priests. And then if we continue reading, then we'll find out that we see the sacrifices having happened. And so This makes sense, though, because you would need the prescription. We would need to be told how to do the sacrifices before we could make sense of the described sacrifice procedures that happened in the cultic ceremony in chapters 8 and 9. And if we scroll down here, we take a look and we see here that this is the temple. And then the temple here is 50 cubits by 100 cubits. And then that gives us 2 squares. And then right in the center of the outer court is the altar of burnt offering. Notice that he has this altar of burnt offering, not the altar of slaughter. And then we have the laver here, or this where you're probably going to be seen where you're going to be washing things, like having washed the entrails. And then the entrance is 20 cubits. So you enter here. And then now we have the holy and the most holy of holies. And pay attention here that the holy of holies is 10 by 10. And how tall is it going to be? It's going to also be 10 tall. So that's going to be a cube. And then right in the center, the Holy of Holies is going to be the Ark of the Covenant. And so then you can see here that, look at this. Where is the Ark of the Covenant? Right in the center. Tabernacle here, the outer courts, or the fence around it. And then you have the tabernacle, and then at the center here and the center here. And so then there's a deliberate, measured purpose to all of these things that are going on. And so then it is important for us to pay attention to these numbers, that there is an order here to creation. There is an order to worship. In fact, Paul tells us in 1 Corinthians chapter 14 that our ordered worship will cause people, when they come in and they see the order of our worship, they will say that God is here in this place, that God is in your midst, which is the very thing that the tabernacle was supposed to symbolize to the people of Israel, that God is in our midst. He dwells with us. And so the burnt offering is always before the Lord, a pleasing aroma, always attracting God's presence. It's a way for us to be able to see the altar, the smoke always rising to heaven, that no matter where you are, you should always be able to see the smoke rising from the altar, saying that God is here. He is smelling this pleasing aroma. We can smell this, and this is good. So I think it is important for us to pay attention to the burnt offering. It's the offering that seems most likely to have transformed into a means of prayer. Remember the various times in which, like Saul offered a burnt offering to be able to get God's presence, to pay attention, so that he could say, please God, help us to win this battle. And Samuel is saying, what are you doing? This is not for you to do this. The burnt offering, as I had said before, is multifaceted. It was a tangible expression of devotion, a means of seeking divine favor, a pathway to find purification and forgiveness. Symbolized a total gift to God. The ascending smoke represented a direct connection to the heavens. Over time, the purification and reparation offerings gained prominence for specific sins, but the burnt offering retained its place as a fundamental act of worship. It served as a reminder of the presence of God among his people and their ongoing relationship with the divine, which is the reason why the burnt offering has changed into mostly prayer, where we can come to God and we can entreat him and ask him by praying ourselves. We no longer have to burn an animal to be able to have our prayers go to heaven, because the burning of the animal symbolized God's continual presence. But now God dwells in us. We no longer need to attract his presence. He said, I will make my home among you. Therefore, when Jesus says the time is coming when worshipers will worship in spirit and truth, that is now. We no longer have to journey to where God's name dwells, for he now dwells in us. And so it is important for us to pay attention to that truth. God dwells in us. So let us pray to him and ask him for help in our time of need, and boldly approach the throne of grace. Thank you.